Okay, hi everybody. Hello. I think what we'll do is we'll begin. We're just waiting to see if a few more people might drop in and maybe they will as the session goes along. So as I said when we opened, tonight's session is called Let's Talk Gender. It's a brand new session, so we haven't run this session before. The idea is really to kind of have quite a discussion tonight. Before we get started, I'm going to run through some introductions. So the first thing to say is that this session is going to be an hour, so we should be finished around 7 o'clock. Obviously, I need to introduce myself. So my name is Ali. I'm a counsellor at Off the Record, so I support young people in Croydon and in Sutton. And part of my job is also to look after Off the Record's online services. So if you've been to a Skycast before, you may have seen me already. I'm going to be co-facilitating the session tonight with Claude, who at the moment you can see is in the chat session. I can see Claude's writing now, saying hello. So we're going to be co-facilitating the session. So sometimes you'll see me on the screen and sometimes you'll see Claude. And then in the background, we've got Tiago, who also works at Off the Record, who is going to be coming along and just kind of helping to facilitate some of the discussion in the chat. So that's who's who. I'll do you a quick tour so you can see I can explain what's in front of you. So what you can see in the top left-hand side of your screen is the webcam bit, which is where you can see me waving. Underneath, you've got a list of who else is here tonight. So what you can see is that a few more people have joined us. So we've got, I think Roz has also joined us from Off the Record. Welcome, Roz, and Lama Janae, and Chicken Wings, and Chantel. So we may have some other people join us, but at the moment that's us. In the middle of the screen, there's the kind of presentation area, which is where we'll be showing you some pictures and maybe some videos as we go through the session. On the right-hand side, there's a chat section. That's where you can ask any questions as we go along. I can see you already saying hi. So yeah, the idea of these sessions is to be interactive. Feel free to type away whilst we're talking. That's fine. One of us is keeping an eye on it and can respond. And yes, where I said that we're going to be having more of a discussion tonight. Obviously, although it's more of a discussion session rather than maybe kind of some of the topics which are more about kind of giving you some maybe more kind of information and advice, we still think that obviously talking about gender could be a particular issue for you and might bring up some things that you feel you need some help with. If you are struggling in the session, there is a button that says I need help now at the top of the screen. It should be just kind of above my head. So if at any point you feel you need to talk to someone, just click on that button and we will get back to you after the session. So that's a quick tour of what you can see. So tonight's session, when we talk about gender, I imagine probably kind of lots of things come to mind. Sometimes you might think, is this session going to be about sexuality? Is it going to be about kind of being transgender? Is it going to be about transitioning? And the honest thing is that gender is a really big topic and it affects us all. And so really tonight's session is about having just kind of quite an interesting discussion about some of these ideas and talking about how it kind of affects you in your everyday life as well. So our aims are to introduce the concept of gender and explore our understandings of masculine and feminine. We're going to learn a little bit about the differences between gender identity, biological sex and sexual orientation. And then we'll, towards the end of the session, begin to think a bit more about your own lives and think about how gender influences that. And then think about if there's anything that we can do to kind of challenge or be aware of gendered stereotypes. So quite a lot to get through in the next 50 minutes, but we're hoping it'll be quite an interesting and interactive discussion. I just want to check, I've played around a little bit with the microphone settings for this session, so please let me know in the chat section if you're having any trouble hearing us and we will make some adjustments. And then the most important thing before we kind of go into the content for the session is just to go through some of our guidelines. So we say these at the beginning of every session, and it's just to be really important so you know what to expect from the Skycast. So the first thing is that it's an hour long, and in order to get the best out of a session, it's a good idea to try and stay for the whole thing and to be as present as you can. Try and find a quiet space, put your phone aside, and just try and take this time for you. And everything we talk about tonight in this Skycast is confidential, so that means we don't discuss it with anyone outside of this session. That means that what you say in this forum won't get repeated in any other forum, and equally won't kind of be discussed outside of this kind of virtual space. It's important that we create a supportive space where everyone can let their feelings out and everyone can contribute. So let's treat each other with respect, take each other's views seriously, and if we do disagree with someone, let's just do our best to try and understand where they're coming from. And then, because this session is online, I think this is quite important, is that you need to look after yourself in the session, and if you're struggling, actually because we can't see you, there's no way for us to know. So you're welcome to leave at any time, whether that's just to log off or to take some time out. And if you are really struggling in the session, what we would ask is to use the I need help now button above my head, rather than writing anything in the chat section. And that can just help to make sure that we can kind of continue the session to the end. And as I said before, someone will get back to you. And then the last thing, which is also quite important, is that you can share as much or as little as you want in these sessions. In fact, often when we're in an online space, it can feel easier to talk about things. However, sometimes that might mean that you talk about something that's quite close to your heart, and that could leave you feeling a bit vulnerable. So what we just ask is that you kind of make sure that you look after yourself, stay with what feels comfortable, and make sure you check in with yourself on a regular basis to make sure you feel okay with what we're talking about and your contribution to the session. Right, so that's the kind of terms and conditions bit done. Now we're actually going to begin to actually talk about gender. And what I'm going to do, hand over to my co-facilitator, Claude. There's going to be a swapping of seats going on. And then Claude is just going to talk in a little bit more detail about some of these ideas.
So hi everyone, I'm Claude. Let's talk about gender. So I just want to start off by saying that there are no rights or wrongs. Everyone experiences gender differently. So please be respectful of what other people say and feel. And yes, keep that in mind. Hopefully we'll be able to discuss this openly and have an interactive session. I want you to think about gender as an energy. Basically, we're just going to be thinking about our attitudes and understanding of this energy. So let's start by saying there are essentially two energies, although this doesn't cover everything, but to be simple, for God's sake, there's masculine energy and feminine energy. So I want you to think for a second what comes to mind when I say the word masculine. So you want to discuss that amongst yourselves. Thank you all for participating in that discussion. You've made some really interesting points. I've enjoyed reading them. So now we're going to ask basically the same question. What comes to mind when I say the word feminine?
We'll swap places again. Hi everyone. Okay, so what you can see is that we have, like, even just kind of in a brainstorm, we have kind of really kind of quite gendered ideas around masculine and feminine, and they're really actually in our lives. And actually, if we begin to try and think about, like, where do these concepts come from? And I can see already in the chat a little bit of a discussion has begun, because Tiago was saying that sometimes we might feel quite uncomfortable with some of the kind of associations or assumptions we have about a particular gender. And actually we're saying that actually that's something you kind of really pick up and it's something you learn. So I kind of want to ask you guys, where do you think that these ideas of gender have come from? Explore like where some of our, we're just beginning to explore where some of our ideas of culture come from. And actually just from people's initial thoughts, it actually seems like it kind of comes from everywhere. So it comes from your culture, it comes from your parents, it comes from the media. So absolutely, and I think culture obviously is kind of one of the main kind of influential factors in how we feel about gender. And it plays a really big role. And what we wanted to do was just actually show you an advert that we found, which kind of says, you know, it shows how we're exposed all the time to these ideas of manly and feminine.
It's for men. Doesn't mean it is. New Gillette Odor Shield Body Wash targets and neutralizes odor for up to 16 hours. Because you've got man-sized odor hanging all over you. Gillette Odor Shield Body Wash. Wash like a man, feel like a man. Also try new Gillette Odor Shield Anti-Perspirant.
Okay, so it seems like we're having a few new issues tonight with the video. Not to worry, we can come. It sounds like we can have plenty of chat anyway without kind of the videos because everybody's got loads to say. But what the video basically is kind of demonstrating is that there's an advert for kind of male body wash, and it's kind of using all the kinds of stereotypes around kind of sporting equipment, weights, and kind of all the things that we would associate and have associated with the masculine energy. So what we can see is that the culture and the media, as someone said, is very much kind of influential in how we think about gender. And I noticed as well that someone mentioned kind of the idea that we get things from our childhood as well. So one other thing that we pick up is kind of ideas from our parents and from school about kind of what a man, you know, what a good girl does, what a good boy does, and how they kind of behave. And even if you think back to kind of whether you had pink toys, pink blankets, blue toys, blue blankets, kind of your gender has been a really kind of pivotal part of your development, right from the very kind of, I guess, kind of right from your birth, really. What I wanted to then show you now was a little video of some adverts for children's toys. So I think what I am going to do is try and copy and paste the link into the chat section, and then you can watch it in a separate browser and then come back after 5 minutes. So just give me a second and I will put the link in. Hold on.
I recently spent some time watching afternoon cartoons on Nickelodeon and the Cartoon Network, and look what I found.
Nerf's N-Strike Arsenal has a specialized blaster for any mission.
Forever kids pets, it's Snap-on fashion play.
Dirt, mud, we don't care. These trucks go almost anywhere.
Barbie girls, and we're making the scene. Our Jam and Jeep Wrangler is one glam machine.
Holy crap, what is going on here? Clearly, it's been a while since I've raced home after school to watch cartoons, but I was amazed at how highly gendered these commercials were. Have they changed, or did I just not notice them before? The messages being promoted in these commercials are deeply restricting and severely limit the development of boys and girls in different ways. The ads are actively demonstrating that boys and girls have different social roles and skills that are highly stereotyped and just outright sexist. So let's take a closer look at ads targeted directly at boys.
Battleground, prepare to attack.
Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win?
Arclight, powered up. 3-in-1 repulsor, ready for action.
Close combat pistol. Rapid fire blaster.
Always ready for action. G.I. Joe, are you in?
Defend the castle!
Boys have power and get to be active and destroy things. Yeah! These commercials directed at boys value competition, being in control, having power, and conquering and commanding. Those values restrict the acceptable options for what boys are allowed to express emotionally. I've yet to see a commercial where boys are nurturing or caring. They are limited in examples of how to react to problems and how to solve conflicts. They're taught to fight, to be competitive, and to be aggressive. I noticed that there's also a few other reoccurring messages embedded in these ads targeted at boys.
Batcave Building Power. The Trio building system lets you build the ultimate trio Batcave. Then you can build the massive Neptune sub.
You can build up and customize your heavy-duty truck with tons of parts.
You decide how much firepower to arm your ships with, then build your fleet and battle your way to victory.
These ads encourage boys to build new worlds, use their imaginations, and be creative. They are actively making and constructing. These are the training blocks for creative and fulfilling adult lives. The confidence that is fostered through the act of making, building, and doing is something that's almost entirely lacking in girls' toys commercials.
The Live Girls have a flair for hair. I can make my own magic snow.
The easy way to make designer cake. Bake your cake in the microwave in 30 seconds.
By the beauty of the bride, share the gown and light up ring, handsome groom and everything.
Go with me, we're walking round. Go with me, we hit the town. Be alive is so real, you can feed her. And then she leaves an uh-oh in her diaper.
So girls get to play with sparkly glitter and bake cakes and change stinky diapers. How fun! Commercials targeted at girls heavily focus on teaching child rearing, homemaking, domestic work, popularity, self-image, and an obsession with beauty. This restricts their imagination of what women are capable of and prioritizes appearances over intelligence. They are not encouraged to be creative, to build and construct, and really take control of their environments. Girls' toys are generally unimaginative and lack the creative element of play that is critical in the development of young people. We can see this even in the way the same basic product is marketed differently to boys and girls.
Moon sand is the amazing moldable, squishable, buildable, demolishable sand that never dries out.
Moon sand is the amazing, moldable, holdable, decoratable sand that never dries out.
Clearly, this isn't a coincidence since advertisers spend $17 billion a year marketing to youth. That's billion with a B. Young people are seeing more than 25,000 advertisements a year on television alone, and that doesn't even include product placement, which is so common on popular television shows. The enormous amount of money that advertisers are spending isn't just on producing and airing ads. It's also spent on the latest neuroscience research to find out exactly what images, feelings, and representations will appeal the most to developing minds. Although many factors influence our socialization, such as families and peer groups, schools, and churches, the media plays a highly critical role. Advertising aimed at youth is especially dangerous because young children are unable to differentiate between television programming and commercials. They are still developing the necessary critical skills. Youth may have a hard time recognizing that these commercials are teaching them what is expected, what is desired, and what is possible for their genders, for their careers, for love, relationships, and creative endeavors in the future. These messages are so
So I'm hoping that those of you that have navigated off to a different tab have hopefully made your way back to the Skycast now. So yeah, I just thought maybe actually, because that's quite a big video and it says quite a lot about how kind of what happens to us in childhood really influences our perceptions of gender. So I thought maybe we just have a little bit of a chat about some of the ideas that were discussed in the video now. So I just think the chat's really engaging, and I think that's what we wanted from tonight's session, was to have like a really kind of meaty discussion about gender. And what you can see from the slide in the middle of your screen, hopefully, is that there's also kind of, as well as the social influences and kind of the psychological or childhood influences, and I imagine that all three of these are kind of interwoven. There's also the kind of physical and genetic influences. And so one thing you might have to think about is what kind of influence kind of genetics has on our perceptions of gender. And, you know, for example, what about the kind of physical differences that we were identifying between masculine, I think, you know, kind of we're thinking about kind of, when we started talking about masculine, we're thinking about kind of strong and kind of very physical and in the toys as well, kind of physical aggression, those kind of things. And then when you think about feminine, it brings different kind of physical attributes to mind. So, you know, I think that as well as social and childhood influences, physical influences or physical factors also play a role. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. I'm just going to hand over to Claude, but feel free to carry on your discussion.
So, we're starting to see that gender is a little bit more complex than simply man, woman. It's not just about physicality. And to illustrate that, there is a slide from the internet. What we can see from this picture is that there is a clear difference between your gender identity, your orientation, your sex, and your gender expression. So, for example, your sex could be male, female, or intersex. And intersex, something you might want to look up later. I'm not going to be able to discuss it very well right now. But anyway, so we can see that although someone may have physical characteristics that might make you think that they are a woman or a man, that's not their gender. It's more about how they feel in their mind, and how they express that could even be different from how they feel in their mind. For example, you could be a trans man who dresses in dresses or skirts, things that are typically female. So their expression doesn't necessarily reflect who they are. So there's a common misconception that there are only two genders, male and female, whereas in fact that it's a broad spectrum. There are even people who feel that they have no gender at all. They identify as agender. The majority of people are what is known as cisgender, and that is spelt C-I-S. So that means you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. Examples of cisgender people are Beyonce or Stephen Fry. You'll notice that the examples that I gave, one of them is straight and the other one is gay. So what I'm saying is your orientation doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with your gender identity. We're actually, everyone else who isn't cisgender can be considered transgender. And that is a really wide term. It covers a lot of different types of people. And we're actually planning a Skycast later on in the year specifically for transgender people. So I wanted to quickly ask if anyone has any questions about anything I've just said, or if anyone has anything they think they'd like us to cover in this session that we're planning on doing on transgender people. Any suggestions are welcome. So I'm just going to give you a minute. Cool. So thank you for discussing so nicely. I'd like you to think about what kind of gender roles you adopt in your everyday life. And what you'll probably see is that gender is influencing you almost all of the time. So what I'd like you to do is just think of some examples of how gender influences your life and discuss that with the group.
Already really nicely moving us into a discussion here about thinking about kind of the idea of being strong, or actually not just how gender kind of affects our behaviour and our everyday experiences, but also I think, you know, if we just spend a bit of time thinking particularly about our emotions, and how when we talked about emotions at the beginning of the session, it seemed to be that being emotional was a much more kind of feminine concept. And there was definitely kind of aggression was more of a masculine, appropriate expression anger was kind of an appropriate expression of emotion for in a masculine sense. But a female sense of kind of expressing emotion was quite different. It was maybe kind of to be quite out of control, kind of to be unstable, hysterical, someone said. And so we have a lot of kind of gendered kind of ideas about how we should deal with our emotions as well as kind of our everyday behaviour. And I just wanted to get you guys to maybe just begin to reflect a little bit on that about as a person, how do you manage your own feelings, and how do you think that that might be guided by some of these concepts that we've been talking about, such as kind of real men don't cry, or kind of Chantel saying good girls don't get too angry. I kind of want you to think about how that personally affects you now. So I'm just thinking that as we come towards the end of the session tonight, that one of the things we wanted to ask you was how do you think that maybe we as a group and kind of we as kind of individuals in our own world, how we could go about beginning to challenge some of the gender stereotypes that we've been talking about. And I think that actually is really kind of where the discussion has naturally led. You know, kind of we've begun to think about how we all take a responsibility. So I think the question for us, as we begin to think about wrapping up this session, we may just run a few minutes over. I just wanted to think about if there's one thing following this session tonight that you'd like to try and do differently in terms of kind of how you manage gender, how you respond to gender, maybe how you engage in kind of gendered activities or your gendered identity. If there's anything you'd like to do differently, to give you a chance to kind of share it with the group, maybe say what it is and why. It feels like kind of an hour is just gone by really quickly, and I really feel like we've only just begun kind of to get into some of this discussion. I think we'll definitely run this session again. It is the first time that we've run it. So when I end the session, if you hold on for a moment, I'm going to end the session at the end, and it will give you an automatic kind of feedback form. And we'd actually really welcome some feedback on how you found the session, if there's anything we could do differently next time, because obviously it's a bit of a learning process for us tonight. And I think we will definitely, as Claude mentioned, we will definitely follow up with some more in-depth discussion around kind of, I think, kind of some stuff around transgender, and we'd also like to do some stuff around sexuality later in the year as well. And so all ideas welcome. And I think just as we begin to finish, I guess I just got a few kind of bits of admin. So I first of all want to thank everybody for coming along. Kind of whether you've said anything or whether you've just watched and learned, I'm hoping that you'll take something useful away. It certainly feels like we've all kind of got some ideas of things we can do in our own lives. I'd like to say a particular thank you to Tiago and to Claude, who co-facilitated this session with me. And then I just want to kind of flag up that we have some other Skycasts coming up in February. Yeah, we've got one left in February, which is on managing anxiety next Tuesday. And then we've got some other sessions coming up throughout March. You can find them all on our homepage in the What's On section. So yeah, really great if you could join us for some future sessions, because I think the chat's been really lively tonight, and I'd love to see you again. I'm going to end the session. It will give you a feedback form, and if there's anything we can do differently next time, let us know. So thank you on behalf of Claude and I. I'd just like to say thank you very much and good night. Bye everybody.